What he said.
Yeah.
Because I don't think people ask that interesting of questions.
No, they didn't.
That must have.
Oh my god, what a nightmare. All right, welcome to a documentary podcast where we come up with very intricate and clever names for things.
Hi, I'm Catherine.
And I'm Josh. We are both filmmakers based out of Denver, Colorado, and we talk about nonfiction cinema.
Because we love it.
Yeah, we love it, and we think they need to be treated like movies and not just intricate YouTube videos.
Or boring things old people watch.
Yeah. All right, so on this episode, we will be talking about a film called When Lambs Become Lions. But first, what have you been working on?
I've been doing quite the variety of stuff lately. Unfortunately, not any of my own projects right now, because I'm trying to actually have filmmaking be my sole job right now. So I've been doing a lot of commercial work, working on a feature that was from Chicago. So luckily I've been working with a lot of like outside productions from New York, LA, Chicago when they come shoot here. I've actually been working in the art department, which I actually really like on feature films.
Nice.
But yeah.
What does the art department do?
Everything you see. But yeah, for non-filmmakers, even in commercial, even in not documentary, or if you're doing a sit-down interview, then yeah, it's sort of basically everything that's kind of put in front of the screen. As much as that can be part of the cinematographer's job, it's also, set dressing. They help with locations depending on how small of a film it is. Making sure like things read well on camera. Like you don't want like a giant red set of flowers in the middle of a table unless it actually means something, you know?
Nice.
So yeah.
What do you like best about it?
I love creating spaces. If you listen to the last podcast, you probably heard I talked a lot how I think space is just as important as character. And so with that, you can tell so much, and I think exhibition tells so much. I also love thrift stores, so one of the jobs when you're in the art department is just to go to thrift stores and find cool stuff to put in a scene. So
I do want to correct myself on the last episode because I mentioned Errol Morris being someone who just puts their face on camera and has them talk to it. But really, his movies are definitely about the space.
Mm-hmm. The lighting.
The lighting, everything. Because he's one of the few filmmakers, like even A Brief History of Time, like how he rebuilt Stephen Hawking's office on a soundstage. And they rebuilt his house on a soundstage. All the interviews were done on a soundstage. And it definitely gives the movie this otherworldly kind of feeling.
Very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like I like how he does that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's everything feels a little off, which I think is not in all of his films, but when it needs to be.
I'd say that's a common thread. Like that's why I like him, because he just sort of points at how like bizarre our world is that we operate in, and like the people he studies, it's like he pulls out their like, I can never say this word,
Eccentricities?
Yeah. Okay, I'll change the word. He just like pulls out
intricacies.
Intricacies of them, and just what makes people unique, and what makes people unique is often quite bizarre.
Yeah, totally. I think I'll give you that. And so I'm pulling a retraction from the last episode because of that. Because right when you said that, it just like I had that moment of that thought of A Brief History of Time when Stephen Hawking is in his office and you're kind of like, the lighting in this office is weird. And it's because it's very intentional and it's definitely about the space. Mm-hmm. So I feel you there. Are there any projects like that you want to do of your own that you're thinking about?
So many. I think I want to give myself enough time. I think the issue in the past is for documentary, I've rushed into it or I've had deadlines placed upon me. And I think when I've talked with people who I admire in the industry or further on, they've worked on their projects for years. Because I think when you're dealing with real life and stuff changes so quickly, you need that time to sort of develop the story, get to know the people. So unfortunately, there's not any I want to make in like this immediate moment. My end all goal, I'd love to make a long documentary about like transient populations as someone who's moved around a lot and done a lot of reading about like populations that move. I'd like to do it like vignettes of different sorts of people who move around and place that together to sort of potentially put the argument that I think we need to be more mobile as humans, but also as like a self-exploration of like why I am the way I am in a bit. I think that's why we all make films, is to figure ourselves out. So what about you? What are you working on right now or have coming down eventually?
Yeah. I have like a million documentaries I want to make, and I'm just kind of at that point where I'm like, which one do I focus on? And what do I want to spend the next like 3 years of my life on? And for what I'm actually working on right now, I'm finishing up editing a feature film, and we got picture lock done.
Yay.
So now we're at and color is pretty much done. So we're kind of just tweaking the sound, and we're, figuring out exactly what the music's going to be. So just the little details. And
that end up taking months.
Yeah, totally.
Like they need to, but like, yeah.
Yeah, so we should be done with it pretty soon though. I'm really excited. We're going to, try to premiere at a Denver Film Festival next year and then see where it goes from there. And we just had a short film go up on The Bureau, which is kind of a streaming service for short films. So you can go to the Bureau of Creative Works and check out our short film. It's called Many Different People at Once.
Oh, that's a good title.
Yeah, it's from an Anais Nin quote.
What's the quote, Gene?
So here, let me... I reserve the right to love many different people at once and to change my prince often.
That definitely tells
the
story of what it's about.
Yeah, that's what the movie... That definitely, yeah. I saw that quote and I was like, we have to call the movie that.
That's perfect, actually. Does your feature have a title yet, or is...
Yeah, so it's just called In Your 20s.
That's probably going to be a pretty intense...
Oh.
No?
Not
intense. I think intense is the wrong word.
Yeah.
Cut that part out.
No, I think... So the feature... So pretty much everything we're doing with our narratives is trying to strip away as much as we can from them. Like, we're really like exercising in minimalism. Like, how few camera movements can we tell the story? How few coverage can we get, or how little coverage can we get and still tell this story and have it be impactful? And I think that with these films that we've been working on, it actually makes them more impactful. Because you're really, they really are about living in the spaces with the characters. And there's rarely any close-ups. We don't do any cutaways. Like, we really stripped away like everything that you're supposed to have in a film. And it's scary because, like, as a filmmaker, we all want people to think that we know exactly what we're doing,
And you want control.
Yeah. And so we're really kind of stripping that away and almost like being in a really vulnerable position, like putting out these films that don't have any like filmmaking flourishes in it.
Mm-hmm.
And
you must also be putting like a lot of trust in your actors as well.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah, because I write the films and I'm not married to anything I write when we go in. Like, when we're making a movie about, like, In Your 20s is about a 20-year-old girl who is kind of struggling with becoming 20 and living in your 20s and that weird age where you're like over 18 but you're not old enough to go to bars yet, and like
you think you know everything and then the next day you know nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And just about how relationships are kind of changing and you're changing and really starting to figure out who you are, but maybe not. And so
nothing is certain.
Yeah, so when we're doing that, I'm a 33-year-old guy, and I really have to put trust that they know more than I do about what it's like. Because I kind of remember what it was like when I wrote the story. it is about my life, but I don't necessarily experience it the same way that the character does, and I really rely on the actors to bring that to it. So what have you been watching lately?
Okay, I have to think of like what we didn't talk in the last one. Okay, so I talked about.
Yeah, I should probably do that too. Okay.
So, what I've been watching lately, as I said in the last one, I have difficulty watching things at home, so I have to see what comes to theaters, and unfortunately that usually means like subpar documentaries or ones that are very much in the style of like sit down interview, let's do some like flashbacks and then some actual stuff. So within that realm, I saw Hall about the director Hall Ashby from the 70s, which I'll say that sort of structure fit that film pretty well because he has passed away, and they interviewed both actors he had worked with and other filmmakers, and more of talked like really like focused on one part of his career and sort of who he was versus trying to make like a historical documentary of sorts.
I like when people do that.
Yeah, and it made me like want to go watch his films after, so I was like, it probably served its purpose. So I
love his films.
If you love his films, I would recommend watching it. And also for people who don't know as much about sort of like the history of cinema, especially when it comes to the studio system, it's a really good example of how studios can crush incredible directors. He had one of the greatest careers within a decade, like made so many incredible films, like Harold and Maude, and just the list goes on.
Have you seen Being There?
I have not seen Being There.
You should watch Being There. I think it's on Amazon Prime right now. It's
okay.
I just love that movie so much. It's so beautiful.
His stuff, it's the same thing. It's about relationships and just how bizarre we are as people. And then as soon as sort of like the 80s came in and studios had more power and being bought out, he lost his career in essence. And so it's sort of, you need to give artists their freedom to make what they want. And I think it's a good argument for that. I also saw, because the Denver Film Festival was going on last month, how do I pronounce his name? Oh, Panahi's new film. He's the Iranian filmmaker who's been banned from filmmaking. He did Tehran Taxi that came out.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Great filmmaker. He's an example of kind of the opposite of what I just said, where restrictions can often make you be a stronger artist or push you into developing new things. And so Tehran Taxi, the film before this, he filmed entirely in a taxi cab because he wasn't allowed to make films. And so it's just sort of conversations that deal with there's like a code of conduct that all Iranian films have to have. And so he kind of delves into that. And his new one, it's kind of like continues off of that idea in a way. So he starts driving, but he actually exits his car, and it's about sort of like a woman who's being oppressed by like a small town village and how this country is not modernizing in a way that's being open to everybody, especially to women, but how women are defying that. And I think he's got some of the most clever writing that I've ever seen. Like he tackles politics or social issues without being on the head or like nail on the head, but still like really gets his point across. So that one will probably I know Tehran Taxi is on Netflix. This one will probably, which is called Three Faces, will probably come to Netflix or Amazon in the next couple months. So yeah.
Cool. I want to highlight a film by Sophie Fiennes, who's one of my favorite documentary filmmakers. She just makes beautiful, weird, strange films. She did Pervert's Guide to Ideology and Pervert's Guide to Cinema with Slavoj Žižek, who's like a Marxist thinker slash psychoanalyst. And there's this film that she did. It's a very minimalist film and super beautiful called Over Your Cities, Grass Will Grow. It's from 2010. And it's about a German industrial artist whose name I can't pronounce, so I'm not even going to try. Just go look it up. It's called Over Your Cities, Grass Will Grow.
I need to write this down as well.
Yeah, it's incredibly beautiful. There's like barely any dialogue. There's like this, it's like this it's definitely about what you're talking about, because it's almost like this city-sized art project this guy does, and most of the film is just panning shots through, like dolly shots, like through the artwork.
Oh my god, that sounds beautiful.
Yeah, and I tried to watch it the first time, and I was like, oh my god, this is so tedious. But I kept thinking about it, and I was in kind of a more calm mood and in the mood to just kind of like live in a film. And I thought of it and went and rewatched it, and it's just incredible. I don't even know, like, to have that kind of restraint to put out a movie like that, like, that takes a lot of confidence, and Sophie Fiennes, I think, just does that.
Is that like comparable in a way to like Weissman? A little bit, or
yeah, I would say
we have to put effort in. Like what you get out is what you put in, and you have to be willing to be bored
Definitely.
and impatient.
Yeah, I would say that. But yeah, that's an incredibly great film. I really like it. And another one that's also a little bit on the meditative side, Walk With Me. It's a film about a Buddhist monastery in France, and I clearly went through like a Buddhism film phase, but the filmmaking in it is just so... No one gets interviewed. It really is about this place and the feeling of this place and the feelings that these monks and Buddhist teachers and stuff are trying to bring out of you. And I think the film does a really good job at capturing that and really like letting you live in this place. So yeah, those are going to be my two today.
Just and are those available to stream online? Because I feel like I need to watch them now.
Over Your City's Grass Will Grow, I'm not sure. I think you might have to buy that one.
Okay.
On iTunes or something. And Walk With Me is on Netflix.
Good to know.
So definitely, both of them are really great films. Our main film today is a film that we went to the Denver Film Festival to go see.
The film that we went and saw was called When Lambs Become Lions. It's a film by Jon Kasbe.
I think we've decided Kasbe.
Kasbe,
but we could be wrong.
Kasbe. Apologize if we're pronouncing that wrong.
Yeah, John, if you're listening to this film,
we're really sorry.
We're sorry. I mean, this podcast, we're sorry.
Yes. But yeah, so it came out this year. It's currently making the festival circuit. And the summary that's been, I guess, supplied by the film is: in the Kenyan bush, a small-time ivory dealer fights to stay on top while force is mobilized to destroy his trade. When he turns to his younger cousin, that's a bit of a spoiler, a conflicted wildlife ranger who hasn't been paid in months, they both see a possible lifeline. I'd say that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, for sure. I think this movie is really dense.
Incredible film, I'll say that. Like, highly recommend.
I was so my first impressions of this film is just like from the very beginning, you just get a real sense of the place. It's incredibly beautiful. Like, the cinematography is just gorgeous.
Which was actually done by the director.
Yeah, so the director shot everything. I think he was his own crew too, right?
I think you had a sound person.
Okay.
And like in the credits, there was like a second shooter because there was often a lot of parallel action going on.
I remember him actually saying that in the conversation afterwards now too. But yeah, it was incredibly beautiful, and just the subject matter is just... So I'm coming at this film from a vegan, animal rights activist like perspective, and I've had a certain view of poachers, very negative. It's very dehumanized in the communities like I come from, like in the animal rights world and stuff. And so this movie, for me, it was almost like a challenge to recognize their humanity and really look at it from like a perspective of a country that has dealt with years of colonialism, violence, and it really like challenged me to feel empathy.
Did you walk away with empathy?
Absolutely.
That's good. See, this is a film that, like, when I watched, was sort of like what I would love to make later on, where even though it deals with like a political, environmental issue, that as outsiders, especially from the Western world, we project our own views and sort of what we've grown up with on other situations. And this one really was not biased. Like you said, doesn't often when you see poachers, they're portrayed in a certain way, and we're like, this is not good for the environment, this is not good for animals, but that's not what the issue was at all. Like, you have to think of what the people who are living there, experiencing it, are going through, and I think this filmmaker did, like, such an incredible job of doing that, like, not painting anyone as a villain, sort of painting the whole situation as, like, as what is the issue, not the people. So I loved it, but...
Exactly. I think that's one of the most powerful things you can do with documentary, and that's one of the reasons why I love it so much. And this film really challenges you to think about what's the underlying issue. Are these people out there poaching and stuff because they think it's fun, or because it's like a fun pastime or something? No. It's like a history of colonialism, violence, poverty, and it's people trying to survive
and feed their families.
And like feed their families.
You see, yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the most powerful things you can do is, like, in cinema in general, whether it's a narrative or a documentary, is taking people that are generally portrayed as being monsters and showing you that they are human beings. And it's more complicated than you think it is.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, it gave you empathy, and I think that's what documentaries should do, is give you empathy from something or someone other than yourself. And I think it's super easy with political and environmental documentaries. Like, I was working for an organization earlier this year, and I walked away from wanting to do that work because I was like, as much as I agree in the cause I am fighting for, it is so one-sided and it is so biased, and you're walking in with a goal. Whereas I think documentary needs to be an understanding, and like we said, more questions than answers. And I think this film did a good job of, he could have easily portrayed these people as bad people with the amount of footage he probably had, but didn't. Like, created both sides that were so complex. And I think that's more important. I don't know, it's hard in today's world. Are humans more important than the environment? But it's like, I think it's more important to be truthful than it is to project your own kind of purpose and goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that that's like, I don't think that that is, having that view is inherently like endorsing, you know, the problems. I mean, there are real problems that come from poaching. Obviously, the animals are being extinct. There's huge environmental issues. Like, for me, like, when you're just commodifying animals and, like, selling, you know, killing, like, these huge animals just for, like, a little piece of them, like, to me, it is still horribly wrong. Like, ideally. But understanding why it happens and what the real underlying issues are, I think, is the most important thing. Because it really comes out of human beings trying to survive and take care of their families. And I think that if there wasn't such a fucked up capitalist market for this ivory and stuff, you know, and like the root of the problem is, I would say, colonialism and capitalism.
Yeah.
You know, capitalism has no morals. Like, if people can make money from something really rare, you know, like, we can't just implicate the people who are at the bottom of this pyramid, because who are the people that are really profiting from this? It's not really the poachers, you know.
You see
it's the people trading.
He's getting calls like, when are you going to do this? When are you going to do this? And the sad thing is, like, the characters are actual real life people, like X and his like assistant Luca, who are going on these hunts. Like, the now repercussions if you're caught killing an elephant is you're killed on the spot. So they're sacrificing so much, where it's like, sewn at the head. Like, I don't want to talk too much politics, but like, look at our president and his sons right now, what they've been caught doing. It's like, I think
if we're doing a documentary podcast, we can talk about politics.
I just hate the administration right now and don't want to talk.
No, it's awful. I feel you.
it can go down a terrible like rabbit hole, but they can get out of it. They can hire lawyers. They have the money. People up are not going to get hurt. They're literally putting their lives on the line, and then subsequently their family too.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't be doing what they were doing if there were other options. You know?
Yeah, totally. And we do kind of get an answer to that later on in the film, which I'm not going to say much about. But
or I'd say at the beginning though, because there's another guy in the film. Well, I guess we already said cousins, but his cousin Asan is working on the opposite side. So it's cool to see these two family members, one on one side, one on the other. How they sort of ethically go into doing what they're doing. But Asan, who's working for like the wildlife police, doesn't get paid ever.
Yeah.
And he the whole time is contemplating switching to poaching or like maybe giving up some information because he can't feed his family.
Yeah. And it's that stress of like, what are these people supposed to do? It's like, it's hard. I think it even kind of speaks to like a bigger issue, you know, like globally, that in a capitalist society, like morality is very difficult to have, you know? And if you're like on the bottom rung of that, then, I mean, it's even harder. And it's almost like an extreme example of like, you know, what everyone faces, I think, in our world that doesn't have much of a safety net for people, you know, that just lets people suffer, you know, in the name of commerce.
Yeah. And how like we sit here and we kind of talked about this earlier, but like and judge what other people are doing or think something is like a single issue when it's like so much more multifaceted. And when you watch this, you see, oh, like I had to check myself for a second.
When we think about how to fix these issues, we rarely ever think about ending poverty. You know what I mean? Like we give money to people to go kill. The government gives poor people money sometimes to go out and kill other poor people who are just trying to survive, the poachers, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So these rangers who are poor, rarely getting paid by the government or whoever, I don't know who pays them exactly, but I think it's the government. You know, they're missing paychecks and stuff. But they're struggling. They're just trying to survive. They're being paid to go out and kill other people that are struggling and just trying to survive, while these other people, you know, are sitting at the top,
just watching. And
we don't even get to see them in the film because it's really, too hard to penetrate, you know. And when we think about this, and when we think about any problem, whether it's people working at an oil company or people working, you know, being poachers or people out shoplifting or something, the problem isn't generally the people at the bottom rung. The problem is with the people who are extracting all of the resources and all of the finances, you know, from the world. Yeah. And we're increasing in inequality. There's more billionaires now than ever. You know, it's like it's to the root of so many problems. And when you really think about most of the problems in the world, most of them come from fucked up power structures.
Yeah, and if I think now, like a lot of the environmental talk is always talking about just transitions, especially when it comes to oil, like similar to what you were saying, the only reason I think that's being talked about right now, this is a bit of a tangent, but like is for political purpose, you know, like if we don't do this and include people, this is the first time they're actually talking about this, it means we're not going to have power in the next election. So it's great that it's being thought about, but it's still from such like, what am I going to get out of this?
Totally.
But what I find interesting, to transition a bit back to the film, is that this is a film that wasn't like politically structured, but I think it like provokes more conversation because it is in that way, like because it's so like open and about more of the struggles of these two cousins, that it makes you think this way, because it's not like saying this is bad or this is good. It's like this is complex, and it allows, I think, a much more informed dialogue than like if an environmental organization had made a film like this.
Totally. And I think that's like where we need to go. And that's what I loved about this film so much, is because I feel like a lot of people, when they're thinking about making a film that is about a bigger issue, a lot of times it turns into like an hour and a half long commercial for their cause, you know? Whereas I think a film like this is like more impactful. And when you watch it, like, you're not getting a black and white answer, but it does make you think, you know? Like when you come out of this movie and you're like, I kind of liked X. Like,
And you said something when we left, and it was what I was thinking. We were like, oh, this played like a narrative in a way. And I give so much props to the editing team on this.
Oh
they
my
had,
God, yeah.
Like the backstories, they went down to Kenya and shot for many, many years. And so like probably had like thousands and thousands of hours of footage.
Well, I think he said they had 700 hours,
okay.
which is still
That's still a lot.
Hours.
In my mind, it's thousands still.
Yeah.
But like to then they put it in a form that like, you know, wasn't your typical like 5-act structure, but it kind of was, and it had reveals, and it had like you don't realize they're cousins for a bit of time, and that was like a great like plant and payoff sort of situation. And the film continues that way of like just following these people, but in a very, very structured way so that you could kind of understand what was going on. And I can't imagine how hard that is to do with a documentary.
Yeah. And I also want to give him props, this filmmaker, because I'm so sick of drones. They're all over YouTube. They're all over every like shitty movie you see. But the way he used the drones in this was actually really good.
Yeah, because you don't think of them as drone shots.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Totally.
And I'll say like the shooting, like
there's only a couple, but I remember being like, this is how you use a drone.
Yeah.
This is when you use it. I'm not going to say like when, you know, but I mean, there's nothing like important that happens in the drone shots, but the way he uses it is the way you should use it.
And I think for me as like a new documentary filmmaker, like I've been told don't say the word aspiring because that like discredits yourself, but like what he's doing, like I'm so like in awe of sort of like the connection he had with his characters. Like someone
the trust that he built with those people like is
and
because they're in very vulnerable positions, and he talked about that a lot after the film.
Like he was going on actual hunts with them. Like there's scenes of like running with the camera shaking, and you don't feel like you have full access to this world. And he said he actually did, but like as someone who's worked on projects, I find that's always the hardest element is like building trust with someone to be like, you can film everything and I'm going to show you everything. So like, and that's what they did. Like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other really cool thing was, as we were talking about the beginning, like working with my actors and stuff, like he kind of took exactly that motto to working with them. Cause I think he said that if the two people in the film who their lives basically depended on, you know, like they were in a very vulnerable position. They could have literally been killed by, you know, showing some of this stuff. Anything that they really wanted him to take out, he would, you know. And I think that kind of respect is very important when you're making a film that
especially a documentary.
Yeah, that can really affect people's lives when you're telling their story. And I think that as filmmakers, that's a really important lesson, that you really have to respect the humanity of the people that you're filming.
Yeah, so it was interesting as someone did, I think, ask a question similar to that during the Q&A after, and he did say there was a lot of stuff they omitted, especially about more of their personal relationships, or like the process they used to like make the poison to kill the elephants. But it's weird when you watch the film, it didn't feel like there was anything missing. So I think it's a good thing for like filmmakers to remember that as much as maybe something's really important, or you see like that would make the film, that like, the trust between the people you're working with is more important, and the audience isn't going to know you had that. So like I try to remember that now, being like, as much as this is great, like that film, I didn't think it needed it.
I think there's another important lesson too, that like sometimes when we watch like these films, we want to see like gory violence and stuff, and I really like credit him for like not including that in there, because I don't think it would have served the film. It's kind of similar to Grizzly Man.
Oh yeah.
You know, with like Herzog doesn't actually like, you never hear the audio of Timothy Treadwell dying, like, you know, you don't need it. and you can still make an incredibly powerful film.
Well, I think...
And when you go away from it,
Yeah.
sometimes in your head you think you saw it already.
I was about to say that. I think our imaginations are so much more powerful than what we could see.
Yeah.
Same thing, like, I love films. I like silence, I think, speaks louder than words do oftentimes. And so it's like, yeah, when you have to infer, I think you feel it more.
There's a lot that could be said about this film.
So much. It's beautiful. I think that's the one thing I would like to say. As someone who, like, is obsessed with cinematography as well,
Yeah.
it is so beautifully shot.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I definitely will give my rating is a definitely go see.
So will I. I'll say go watch it.
Yeah. As soon as you can.
Yes.
And yeah, go into it with an open mind and remember that humans are humans and we're all flawed. Well, I think that does it for this episode. And we will be having an interview with Keegan Kuhn coming up soon, the director of a film called Running for Good, the Fiona Oakes documentary, which is a film that I really love. So I'm excited to talk with him.
So, going forward, for people listening, if there's any documentary you've seen or that you know that's coming out that you think that we should talk about,
Yeah, it
feel
could be
free.
old, new. We don't
We'll
care.
watch anything,
Yeah.
seriously.
We want to talk about documentaries as films, and we aren't here just to promote new films. We're also trying to watch older ones, watch pretty much anything that really speaks to documentary as film.
And deals with humanity. That's what I like. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so definitely send your suggestions to a documentarypodcast@gmail.com.
And our website is adocumentarypodcast.com.
Visit us on Instagram at a documentary podcast.
Mine is at CMS Moments.
And mine is at Joshua LeBure. All right, thanks for tuning in to a documentary podcast, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Sweet.